I've noticed that a lot of you relate to the things that I say and things that I post about ADHD, and I'm dedicating this video to all of you. One of the hardest things for me to do with my ADHD tendencies is to actually manage, mentally manage my time. So if I have a call at 2 p.m. and it's 11 a.m., I my default is to say, "Oh, I don't have any time to do art. I have that call at 2 in 3 hours." I know logically it doesn't make sense. And those of you who do not have this issue probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But those that do understand, I have a feeling really resonate with this. Here's what I've learned from making these videos on YouTube. There is time to make art in very small time buckets. Okay? I also learned this in parenthood because my only shot at creating anything when my kids were really young was just to run away and do it whenever they were sleeping before one of them woke up. So I got pretty good at narrowing down my tools. This is where my color shapers came into play. Very, very, very easy to clean up. If you don't clean up anything on them, you just peel it off later. So no problem. You don't ruin any brushes this way. It's very easy. Grid journals are another way to add art into the margins of your life in little steps, little bits of time as you go. So I happen to have time to sit down and do this entire grid journal in one sitting. However, if you do not have that luxury, you can set up a grid. It doesn't have to be 18 little squares like I have. These are all about 2 inches by 2 inches. You can set something up that is 4 squares, 4 little squares. The squares don't have to be bigger just because you're doing less of them. Okay, if you set something up or whatever number of grids you set up, you can go through and take 5 minutes or less, grab a pencil, make a mark in each of the squares. Done. Then you can go by the next time you have 5 minutes and add some crayon. Again, do something in each square. Done. Move on. As you go, if you keep adding something different each time you go take a pass through, you will end up with a series of however many squares you've done in a little grid. Okay, so please keep this activity in mind as you go through your life. All I'm doing here is one layer at a time, going through and adding something new. And each layer, maybe it sounds too fancy when I say the word layer, each layer just means each step. Each new material that I add, I'm calling a new layer because it's overlapping some of the old layer. So, if you have the luxury of 10 minutes, you could get out paints if you like and do a paint layer. If you only have 2 minutes, use pen or pencil or marker or highlighter. If you've got longer than that, you can do other things. Here I'm using Collage. I'm taking a few minutes to lay things out in areas I might want to try them on, and then I go through and glue them down. So you could take, one of your little bits of time to choose a piece of paper to cut up. The next time you go through, you can take those papers and move them around and lay them out. The next time you have 5 minutes, you can go through and glue them down. We all have little bits of time that we might not know there's anything we could do during that amount of time. There is, especially if you have the luxury of laying things out and leaving them. So if you have a dedicated art space, even if it's a table, even if it's your nightstand, somewhere that you can leave it out during the day and just keep adding one thing to it. I'm making choices that I want to experiment with. This is kind of a whole what if situation as well. I put down some Celadon green. What if I add this bright yellow orange? Okay, so I have some collage paper. Let me add that. Let's see what I can make out of it. What comes next? I don't know. Let's watch and find out. You can do this in your life with your things, and whatever tools you have handy. Does not have to be fancy paint, does not have to be fancy crayons. Take whatever you have around your house. We all have mark making tools. We just don't think of them that way. We all have pens, pencils, different colors. Maybe you have kids. Maybe you've got crayons and markers. Maybe you have, I don't know. Maybe you have an old fountain pen you've never used. Okay, maybe it's fun to play with that. Grab some ink or some high flow paint, which you can also use with it, and make some marks with that. The beauty of the grid is you can try lots of combinations of things, mini, bite-sized, so you can see if you like them together, that you want to work with more. Okay, so if I wanted to take these colors I'm using, this is quinacridone gold I'm putting on, if I wanted to take this and make a larger painting with these colors, now I would know if I like them together. So I often do this with color palettes I'm thinking about. Before I make a giant painting with these colors, I might want to sit down, do a quick grid journal, see if I like the different combinations. What do I like best? Do I like it mostly green and adding the quinacridone on top of the Celadon? Do I like it with having more white space? Do I like having more of the yellow unobstructed so it's super bright? These are all things I can practice and trial during the grid. I'm not consciously thinking about that while I'm making the grid. So I will say that. I'm not consciously saying, now let me leave some green fully exposed. Now let me leave some covered up. I am instead thinking, okay, what if I put the Quin Gold on top of the Celadon? Okay, what if I do this? What if I do this? It's a slight difference, but it's really a difference of, what's it a difference of? It's a mindset difference, I guess. It's about being present instead of planning my next move. So being present is just taking this piece of tissue paper. Oh, what happens if I put this here? Planning my next move, and it's not wrong to plan your next move. Let me just put that out there right now. Planning is not bad, but if you are prone to adding a lot of pressure on yourself to make wonderful art, pressure can be paralyzing. So if you think about it, okay, I've got 5 minutes, I have a bit of tissue paper, let me add a tissue paper layer. What happens if I use a little bit? What happens if I use a lot? What happens if I cover most of a square with it? What happens if I just put little tiny squares in the small square? It's a different perspective than saying, for my giant painting I'm going to do that will be successful, will I put, maybe I'm just splitting hairs here. I could totally be splitting hairs. For me, it's a difference. It might be very nuanced or subtle. So take it for what it is, right? Free advice, get what you pay for. The main point I'm trying to make is experimenting and asking the what if and using the time that you have. In 5 minutes, you do not have to resort to scrolling on Instagram. Again, if you're on Instagram, I'm at Jackie Schomburg Art, right? Instagram's not bad, but I often think, and I get stuck thinking, I only have 5 minutes. I have nothing else to do. I should just scroll on Instagram because there's nothing else I can possibly do during this time. And that's the point I want to remind you and your ADHD tendencies. You can do things should you want to. Okay, if you are feeling stuck with your art and you're feeling like you don't have time to do it, life is too busy, the treadmill's going, you can't get off the treadmill of life, I get it. 1,000% I get it. And you can still create. You have to set up a little bit in advance. because sometimes the first 5 or 10 minutes is just getting out your stuff and clearing off a space. That's totally fine. That can count as part of part of your prep work. Once you're set up, you can do things in 5 minutes. Sometimes you'll have a half hour and you'll spend the half hour doing many passes through these squares. Great. But you don't always have to have the full half hour to make it happen. The very last portion of this video was done, okay, so I lied. So it was actually done in 2 separate sittings. But the first sitting was the majority of it, and the last sitting was about 10 minutes real time, and this is sped up a bit, so it's about 3 minutes, the last 3 minutes of this video. I spent adding a few final touches, and it didn't take very long to do, yet I almost talked myself out of it again because I thought I should just do the voiceover. I shouldn't worry about the last bit. Maybe it'll be fine the way it is. And I don't know, maybe it's my vanity of wanting it to look really good for you guys, but I knew they would want to do something else. I wanted something else at the end and I wanted to punch it up a bit. So I wanted to show you how I was going to do that. So that's why I added the last bit. And again, I'm teaching you the things or sharing with you the things that I need to hear myself, because no matter how much I tell myself there's time, we have enough time to do this, I still forget and I still have to remind myself. So please don't beat yourself up thinking that, oh, I know this, I should know this, I should just do it, and blah, 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 blah. Because I do the same thing. I think whatever we all have obstacles between us and our art. It's that resistance, right? It's from the war of art. It's the resistance that we need to get past to actually start creating. And I swear it's getting from 0 to 1 is a huge step compared to getting from 1 to 2. What I mean by that is getting from not starting the art to starting it is a bigger jump from starting the art to finishing the art, or even just continuing in the art. Going from a stopped position to an action position is always the hardest step. So whatever you can do to give yourself a space to create, lay your materials out. Doesn't have to be a lot of materials. You could just add crayon for every layer and just pick a new color. Focus on a different shape to add. You can keep it as minimal as you need to, depending on how much space you have. If you only have a nightstand, grab some pencils, a highlighter, a couple crayons, you're done. Perfect. We make things really hard for ourselves, at least I do. I guess I'll point it at me. I make things really hard for myself and I think, oh gosh, well I can't bring all my paints to this thing and I can't fit all my paints on the table. I don't need all my paints on the table at the same time. I really don't. I forget that because I don't like putting things away. So I end up with a collection of bottles on my table after every art making session. But we need so little when it comes to space to create and time to create. Our mental perspective and mindset is the biggest obstacle. So with this video, I'm trying to remind you that just because you think it, it doesn't mean it's true. So if your brain says, oh my gosh, I have a call in 3 hours, I don't have time to make art, please remind your brain that you do. You don't have time to make the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Okay, I'll give you that. But you do have time to make art if that's what you'd like to do. Again, I'm not trying to add pressure and say that you have to do these things because that's not at all true. You do you. But if it's something that you want to do that you're not sure how to make space for yet, I highly recommend grid journaling. I actually have a grid journaling made easy free guide that I'd be happy to send you. And I'll put a link to that up above. But it will give you some templates. So you don't have to spend time tracing something to get your squares. How about that? You don't even need to tape anything off. I will give you different templates depending on how many squares you want to do and what shape you want to do. And you can just start with that and go right to it. Print it out for yourself, print it out for your friends, make a little coffee shop date of it, which is actually really fun. I've done that. I highly recommend it. Grab some friends, grab some copies, and then go get yourself some coffee or a donut or something and enjoy it. I want to make art as accessible to you as possible if it's something that you want to do. I know how much art changes me for the better and changes my day for the better and changes my attitude for the better. And I want to share that part with you and or help you get there if you have realized that this is something that you want to do more of. Then I want to get you there. All the materials I'm using, because it's a grid journal page and because these are so small, I'm using hardly anything. I had a small piece of tissue paper that I started with. It was it was probably like, I don't even know what it was. I don't know what it was, honestly. I would guess like 6x8, maybe smaller. I tore some of that up. You can see there's still big chunks of it at the bottom of the screen that I didn't even get to because I don't need very much. So if you take 2 or 3 pieces of paper, and that's if you even want to add collage, 2 or 3 pieces of paper, you will have plenty to use as you're going through this. You do not need to have stacks of magazines and bins of collage scraps for this exercise. Grab pieces of paper that are different from each other. Maybe one's dark, maybe one's light, maybe one has a pattern, maybe one doesn't. Whatever you want to do. I'm adding Neocolor IIs right now with this turquoise color. I wanted to give it a little highlight, just to pull some color out because everything else is kind of a mid-range tone. And because it's Neocolor II, I use those because I couldn't decide if I wanted to spread this color throughout and have it kind of soften the edges, or if I wanted to just have hard edges like a regular crayon. So this at least gives me options. And you'll see as I go, I do a mixture of both. If I want to seal in my Neocolor IIs so that they do not spread, I will use my color shaper, use some gloss medium, and make one pass across it. If I make 2 passes, it will start to smear because it's supposed to. It's water soluble. It's supposed to soften at that point. But if you just do one quick pass with gloss medium, it won't smear or it won't smear much, and then it will set. So then you can do whatever you want on top of that once it's dry, and it won't smear anymore. So in that sense, the Neocolor IIs are the best of both worlds. You can see I'm getting very thinky. But I really enjoyed adding this as another tone because the Celadon is a green. I added some darker Celadon, more of a gray blue tone. And this becomes then a highlight and a focal point because it's so bright. And it's kind of still a mid-range value, but the brightness and the saturation is so nice that it stands out. And it's not so foreign from the color scheme. I really like turquoise and quinacridone gold together. That's something I never in a million years would have ever thought of until Jane Davies used to use those colors a lot together. And I was like, this is interesting. So then I played with it on my end and found that I really like those colors together. So this is what I mean by having the one pass of the gloss medium. I'm also using the paintbrush with gloss medium to intentionally spread out the colors and thin them out a bit and have the color kind of, it's like a kind of like a little bit of a glaze. You just might get a bit of a turquoise tint on some other areas nearby, which helps soften the edge. You can also do one pass with the paintbrush as well, which also won't smear it too much. And now that I've got all these colors on, I lost a lot of the white space that I had initially. So now I'm trying to add that back, at least in places. This just pulls out some really light values. White and black are always going to be the highest contrast. I love high contrast things with all my black and white things. But even with like a mid-range color palette, it's nice to also have light and dark value. You can make that as little or as large of an impact as possible. So if you just want a teeny little bit of white, that's fine. Again, all of this is personal preference. It's all subjective. And some people don't like having white. I didn't used to like having white in my paintings because things looked unfinished to me. And somehow over the past few years, I've done a total 180 on that. And now I love having white and black. This is that last little punch up that I was telling you about earlier. I took this red-orange Neocolor I crayon and wanted to add some darker values to this golden yellow color. And I feel like this orangey red combined with the turquoise, and in a little bit I'll add some red, warmed things up a bit. I didn't need it. I do like how it looked without it as well. But once I started adding the orange red, you can see that I continue adding it because I was having fun putting it on. So half of it was because it was fun to do, and half of it was because I liked the effect it was having on the whole, right? This is a whole little mini series of 18 tiny paintings now. For those of you wondering what I will do with this, I will keep it in my journal and I will enjoy it. I don't need to do anything with this, nor do you. So if you make a grid, enjoy your grid. If you want to cut it up, you could certainly cut this up and put it on, like, tape a square to a greeting card and send it to a friend. They would love that, I have no doubt, to get original art on a card. Oh my gosh, amazing. But you don't need to do anything with your art. Art does not have to be functional. It can just be there for you to enjoy the process of making it. It can just be there to enjoy the process of looking at it later. I'm not sure when art became something that had to be used in a certain way. Maybe it's because people are trying to make money with art, which, makes sense, right? This is what I'm trying to do. But everything does not have to be a moneymaker. It can just be for fun. And if you're feeling stuck and you're feeling like there's not enough time, I would encourage you to play with something like this as much as possible to remind yourself that it can just be for fun. That in itself will probably loosen you up on the other work that you want to create. Art can just be fun. And, say it with me now, you do have time to make art. You have enough time. You can make this in the margins of your life. And every layer is kind of its own distinct thing. Even if you get half a layer down and you finish up with the crayon later after dinner, again, totally fine. But I would suspect you have more time than you think. And I would suspect that you will make more progress on this than you would ever imagine in the course of one day. If every time you pass it, every time you think about it, you run over and you add one layer, I bet you will surprise yourself with how much you can get done. So let me know. Grab my Grid Journaling Made Easy free guide. It will give you templates, so you don't even have to worry about making your own template, and you'll be ready to rock. Let me know how it goes in the comments. Let me know what your thing is that helps you make art in the margins of life.